part of that point is really looking at where you are at in the cycle. And I think you have to first ask yourself, what type of athlete are you? Do you involve yourself in more fitness and recreation? Are you more of a ballistic activities? Stephanie at one point in her life was the most ballistic woman on the whole earth with that discus throw. And then we see a lot of injuries with football. It takes a lot more conditioning to handle a 7-second sprint, a 45-second rest, do it again for 3.5 hours straight. So what type of conditioning and ballistic nature do you need for your sport? Because to be honest, no athlete in the world can stay in the best shape of their life continually. Doesn't exist. You can't do it. The game of football, you got to last till playoffs and then the season begins. The game of ballistic one movement Olympics, it's a peak at a singular moment. So really it comes down that there's probably more questions, when it comes to what do we do with this here with 2020. And, I like the idea of trying to upgrade your sword, developing in something that you're not that good at, finding a hole in your athletic ability and filling that hole rather than constantly obsessing over the sport. Now that works really well if you don't have to be ready by next week. But you got to flip that switch. If you might be called to action in a week or 2 or 3, you kind of have to flip it and not dive too much down the strength and power game, but stay in reasonable condition so that you can actually start. So I think you really got to zoom out first and what do you need to be good at to do what you love?
Yeah, what's your time frame so you can work backwards from that? So to the baseball point, they're not going to start playing games until March at the earliest. And not to jinx anything, but that's not even really guaranteed right now, right?
Sure, yeah.
So there's this extended period of time in all sports that they have that they've never had before and will probably never have again. So it is a super unique opportunity.
I know. That's kind of it's a whole other topic to talk about youth sports and kind of where they've headed and gone over the last 10 years. I know every single one of us that competed in sports growing up, it was one sport after the next. I look forward to playing 5 different sports in a year. And now to play 2 is a challenge because it's asked of every athlete to be in it for 10 or 11 or 12 months out of the year continuously. You really don't get those key opportunities, those phases of the year to develop your body or to take a break. So I wouldn't take a break from now until March, but what we're trying to say is use it as a blessing to identify your limitations or identify the things you've wanted to get better at that you've only been given maybe December as a baseball player to truly work on and focus on it for a solid 3-4 months. And you're going to be ready regardless of what date they give you if you commit to something like that.
Yeah, so I think it's interesting as healthcare providers and sports medicine, I think sometimes we get blamed a lot for going out and saying, oh, you got to have an off season and shut it down, and you need to shut it down for 2 months out of the year, and that's a common recommendation, and I think that's a little debatable, maybe to what degree that is. I think we can talk about that as well, but none of us up here would say that, hey, let's shut it down and just sit on the couch for 2 months ever, but maybe if you're throwing hard and competitively for 12 months out of the year in baseball, or if you're playing competitive games in basketball or in football 12 months out of the year, that's obviously not your best choice. So we need some version of still work on your skills and maybe tone down your intensity, work on different aspects of your game, and then bring it back. We'd recommend that any time. And I think that this is a time where it's forced upon the athlete now. And I think probably way too much. Now you've been 6 months out now from doing things. We're at this point of we have this huge gap of performance. This probably weren't training a lot, probably couldn't train a lot. No gyms, no teams to work with, no coaching available immediately. So certainly for the first 2 or 3 months, and then maybe now getting back into it. So I think the messaging I would say, and something we see, and it's been well published in the media, is regarding our baseball guys again with the UCL injuries. Right, you get the guys and they tear their UCL, and they have surgery, and sometimes it's a 12-month, 14, 16-month rehab to get back out on the mound, especially at the big league level. And what we see is often statistically those guys come back throwing harder. Yeah. And here's you with 12 months off, theoretically from their sport competition, and they're coming back a better athlete. And I think that's a comparable analogy to what we're seeing now during this COVID time is, can people take advantage of this time? And I would say the reason why UCL guys come back and throw harder is probably not because of the graft itself. That doesn't seem to make a lot of sense. I don't think any doctor would even say that. But what happens is it's the first time in the athlete's career that they truly took a year to repair their body. Similar to the way I was talking about Stephanie, where it took a year to repair her body to do a certain thing. I think when you do that, if you master your skill set and you're coming up and through high school and into college, and you've got some skills, maybe you can't master that skill set. This is an opportunity right now, I think, to just really, really work on your body and get it in a position to be successful. And that's what we break down with these elbow guys, right? Is all their shoulder work, all the thoracic work, getting kinetic drive to the hips and to the legs so they can transfer force properly. And then they come back and they're just as shocked as anybody. They're like, damn, this feels good.
But it's back to the basics, things that when they're competing and playing, they don't think about, the coaches don't think about. There isn't time put into that. So it's like that foundational kind of rebuild that, again, this long period of time we have now could very much be used for.
I saw that a lot when I worked a lot with Uriah Faber. And I like talking about him because he's such an awesomely genuine guy. But during our stretch, when I was working with him for about like 10 years in between the WC and UFC, he had a lot of wins and losses. Favorably for him, more wins than losses. But I noticed a little trend that every time he got injured and he had a rehab stint, and he and I got to work together, we paired therapy and rehab combined with some good strength and conditioning, just some solid foundational work. And he always came back with a stronger camp and a win. And it was really kind of fun to see that he really tied a lot of wins, after a rehab stint. And so maybe we look at 2020, we call it a rehab year.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's a great way to look at it.